Thump! Another Tanagish fell. It was Entishan, a cauterized hole the size of a dinner plate through his back. The temple stones sizzled under his lifeless corpse. All heads turned to the skies. Two Gixins dove madly down toward them, and though they were yet too far away to hear, Aethioe could only imagine each of them screeching loudly and angrily about violence against the Gixin Jael being an unfathomable sin, with death as the only suitable punishment. Thump, thump, thump! Thikwa fell, his head 3/4 gone, his right leg incinerated up to the knee, a sizzling hole by his left hip. Scatter! Aethioe commanded, taking as many steps at a time up to the Starhopper as she could, zigging when it seemed she would zag. Umerit was hot on her trail, doing his best to follow his lord's lead, but he caught a step a little short and stumbled. His head dipped. He recovered his footing and thump, 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 thump. The air above his left ear crackled with heat as an F-slug just missed its mark. Umerit risked a quick look to sight his pursuers, then turned back to following Aethioe up the side of the temple. In doing so, he noticed another of his brothers slain by the evil flying monsters. He ground his teeth in frustration and climbed faster. They needed stronger arms. The rest of the Tanagish, still keeping pace with Aethioe, had gone to all fours to help them scramble up the side of the pyramid. All, that is, except for Durnd, 20 meters behind them and slowed by the weight of the Gixin's blade held back and away from his hip. Thump, thump! A scream from below. Umerit risked another quick look to see Durnd yelling as he ran. A sizzling hole just behind him, steam rising from his new blade. His scream was one of triumph. "Get their blades if you can!" he shouted in Muzi, in defiance of the great Retributor's teaching that the god's tongue was the only way fit to speak. "You can swat their rage like fat, hot flies!" He shouted his discovery with challenge in his voice and a ripple through his tail. "They are not gods!" Durnd laughed almost maniacally to smother the grief he felt at the loss of his brothers. Aethioe met his eyes briefly in the midst of her chaotic climb above him. Her expression was unreadable. Durnd sincerely hoped the deliverer was not offended, but, he reasoned, they were caught in the open, and he thought it best if the invaders didn't know what they were saying. From now on, each of their actions would either help them survive or get them killed. Before Durnd could give any more thought to Aethioe's opinion of his tactics, the rest of the Tanagish all echoed his cry of defiance. Aethioe added a challenge of her own to the giant invaders. "Come and face your doom, you soulless vermin!" in perfectly fluent Muzi that none but Umerit, who taught her, had ever heard her speak before. Once again, the Tanagish were surprised by the spoken word, if only for the shortest of pleased instants. And after another joyous cheer for yet another wonder from the deliverer, the Muziengu all began to feel a little pressure growing behind their eyes and a thrumming between their ears from the emanations of the two descending Gixins above them. The giant aliens flared and flashed with anger and battle-coded messages. Then they split up. One dropped toward Durnd, while the other angled toward the top of the temple. As Aethioe raced to the top, she saw the creature slow to hover above the Starhopper, seemingly unaware of its importance. The monster took aim. Aethioe kept up her frenetic pace to the top, spinning and whipping the Lojazi Raka wildly in front of her as the Gixin Jael unloaded a barrage of F-slugs in her direction. The dark young woman released a battle cry made up of equal parts rage and despair as she watched the F-slugs come in. All her efforts seemed futile, and she mourned the future of the Muziengu after what was sure to be her death by incineration. Shoom! With a wide swipe of the legendary Ragoga, Aethioe intercepted the first of the Starhot F-slugs, and the Lojazi Raka completely absorbed the attack. 4 more shots came screaming in. Moving through a flurry of protective swings and whips with the unconsciousness of muscle memory, a part of Aethioe was surprised to be alive. She was even more surprised when the Judge of Shadows devoured the remaining F-slugs sizzling down from above. With a growing smile on her face, she pushed forward, her movements bold, her confidence returned. Near the end of her defensive routine, the Lojazi Raka, that nullifying hole in the night, spun away from her in a wide arc in what was meant to be a transition into a series of long, sweeping attacks. But the move left her exposed, and the Gixen's next barrage of shots came in fast. Too fast, Aithiawi realized, to block in time. She closed her eyes in defeat. The F-slugs streaked through the darkness, and the Lojazi Raka sucked them right out of the air from over a meter away. Above her, the Gixen Jail angled to slow its descent, as shocked above as Aithiawi was below. If this woman's weapon was any indication of her culture's technology, then the expedition would do better to wait for its military scout ships to return from the other of this gas giant's moons. Whack! Aithiawi had reached the top of the temple and swung the Lojazi Raka in a low arc, cleaving stone from a short wall to fire a chunk of the temple at the Gixen Jail like a missile. The flying giant's panes fluttered in surprise. Its alignment with Duchiff's magnetosphere faltered. The hunk of stone came in unbelievably fast and blasted the prismatic creature close to the center of its twisted coalescence. The sound of stone pulverizing Gillith plate was nowhere near as horrific as the monster's agonized wail. Thump, 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 thump. Scorching plasma blasts came crackling through the air at Aithiawi from the other Gixen Jail descending on the temple. Shoom, 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 shoom. Whipping and spinning and reeling, the Lojazi Raka snatched the boiling shots out of the night sky just as Durnd joined the Deliverer at the top of the temple stairs. Cursing and slapping away at even more incoming F-slugs with his new giant blade, the young Muziengu looked almost comical, but his determination to draw the flying invader's attention away from his savior made his efforts inspiring instead. The task was not easy, and Durnd quickly grew silent with the concentration it took to keep up with the creature's staggered timing and subtle changes in aim. But his head had cleared of the strange pressure and thrumming once he took up next to his lord, and his mind was up to the task. And soon enough, his gambit paid off, allowing Aithiawi to go back on the offensive. Whack! Piece by piece, the dark young woman chipped away at the top of the temple with the Lojazi Raka, launching chunk after deadly chunk of stone at the flying invader. When the first of her missiles ripped through the air, close enough to scar the monster's unsettling complexity, the Gixen Jail forgot Durnd completely and devoted itself fully to shooting Aithiawi down. Noting the change in the creature's focus, Durnd urged the Deliverer to get to the silver chariot of Chiff, but the dark young woman's blood was hot with fury, and a lust for death burned in her eyes. Durnd looked around for some way to get through to her. He saw the Gixen Jael she wounded in full retreat. Lemony yellow fog clouded its wake as it folded evasively up into the night. Durnd saw the 5 remaining Tanagish scramble around the top of the temple in search of something worth throwing, even though their remaining aggressor flew far outside the range of even the strongest of them. And with this thought, Durnd noted that the strongest of them did not stand with his brothers. Umedit was gone. Durnd glanced toward the temple stairs. Umedit was right behind their lord only moments ago, and Durnd hadn't seen him fall. The young Muziengu looked around again with short-lived worry, for he realized that it didn't matter where Umedit had gone or even if he still lived. More invaders approached. A lot more. And even the Deliverer, wielding the Lojazi Raka with all her skill and all her luck, would be no match for a sky filled with these monstrous devils. She would eventually tire, and then he and the Tanagish and all the rest of the Muziengu would be crushed. A streak of light and heat and a rush of air blew over Durnd's head, and the Gixen Jael that had just been flying high above them, attacking them with all its considerable skill, bloomed into a broken, powdery mess. Then the shattered panes and the Xanthus gore rained down upon the temple stairs in a cloud of the creature's yellow blood. All heads turned to the Starhopper. Extending from its housing in the middle of the ship's concave roof, the barrel of a fusion cannon bled smoke into the night air. Further below, the Starhopper's metal alloy ramp lowered down to touch temple stone. Umedit's voice boomed out of the ship's PA. "Everyone, get on board, now! Tanagish!" Aithiawi, near breathless, echoed his order and rushed toward the ship. The others moved to follow her when a curtain of blinding destruction appeared and disappeared like the blink of some cosmic eye. The entire temple, just shy of the Starhopper's ramp, was suddenly gone. A shockwave like the rending of all existence split the air. Aithiawi was thrown into the ship's entryway as the Starhopper itself was blown into the sky like a blade of grass in a storm. Somehow, Umedit kept his head, and having strapped in, he kept his seat, closed the entryway, raised the ramp, activated the unidirectional gravity generator, and brought the engines up to flight thrust in a series of surreally clear and efficient movements, as if his life had dropped into slow motion, giving him all the time in the world to do what needed to be done.